Buying a property is an experience that comes with a mixed bag of emotions. I would put stress, excitement, pride, dread, and confusion in my top 5. Some of these emotions are not overly desirable, and I can only imagine that they would be amplified during the buying process, considering how much there is to do before you actually get your keys. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Reese, and in today's video, I'm going to be discussing the risks associated with investing in property to better prepare you for the buying process. I have now gone through this process twice, and I really have gained perspective of just how sweaty it can feel sometimes when you think about the risks associated with the process I'm about to cover. Cards on the table, I have approximately $1 million of debt split between 2 properties, and the mortgage repayments on those properties are not necessarily cheap and easy to manage unless a lot is going on in the background, making sure that I stay on top of it. Yes, interest rates are at an all-time low. However, that is not a good excuse to be complacent, especially with that much debt, which is the reason why I've decided to make today's video, because I think it is an important topic for home buyers to understand. There are a lot of things to consider during this process, and understanding the elements contained within this video are really, really important. Okay, so with context out of the way, let's jump right into the first risk associated with buying or investing in property, and that is the looming threat of rising interest rates. Interest rates are rising. It is almost a daily headline on any type of social media that you follow. And like I just mentioned, they are the lowest they have ever been. Could they continue to go down? Sure. Are they more likely to go up? At the moment, it is seeming that way. And why is this a bad thing? Or why is this a scary thing? Or why is this a risk? It's a risk because people have been borrowing up to their necks, especially in Australia. They are borrowing multiple times their annual income, including myself and my partner. It's definitely not new news. It's just how the system has been working for a long period of time. And that threatens people, especially if interest rates rise too quickly. It could definitely put pressure on their ability to make their repayments, and then more bad things can happen along the line. And to be honest, it's not like people have much choice these days. The property market has just gone absolutely crazy within Australia, let alone the world, where prices are just reaching all new time highs. And it's a really scary thought, because for people to even be able to get into the market, they are needing to borrow, like I said, multiple times their annual income, which is really scary. It's really risky. And I'm going to continue to go through the reasons why in a moment. I guess the main emphasis I wanted to put on why I'm saying this is that it's almost impossible now for most people to buy in any major city comfortably unless they have handouts or they have fallen into some windfall of cash and inherited money, which does happen from time to time. It's not what I'm focusing on in this video. I'm just trying to explain that buying property is just continually getting harder, especially in the country that I live. Back to the risk though. The tipping point for these people though is the point of concern. It's not only the financial aspect that we're considering here. If interest rates rise too quickly, it can put strain on more than just, let's say, a couple's relationship or an individual's ability to make those repayments, which will reflect and feed into other aspects of their life. Relationships do fall apart over financial issues. I have made a video talking about this topic and linked it down in the description below if you are interested. Now would be a good time to quickly hit that like and subscribe button as well. Finance is centered around relationship issues big time. If you have financial problems, you potentially will have relationship problems. It is something that has been talked about and discussed very widely on the internet. Do some reading, watch my video. I think it's a pretty interesting read/watch. The other aspect of this as well is that if you're unable to make those repayments for a period of time, the bank or whoever you've borrowed money from could potentially take your home, sell it for a cheaper price. You might end up losing out like a lot of people did in the 2007-2008 GFC, which I also have linked the video I've made on the topic down below as well. Let's do a quick hypothetical. Let's say I'm sitting on $1 million of debt and my interest rate is a flat 3%. That's about $30,000 a year of interest that I need to come up with to pay the bank on top of my principal repayments to actually reduce the size of the mortgage. Now, let's say interest rates rise to 4%, which isn't even a large jump. That is totally possible, something that could definitely happen within a 12-month period. Now I've just gone from having to pay $30,000 a year to $40,000 a year. That is an extra $10,000 that I need to come up with, where some people might not be equipped to be able to do that. For people living paycheck to paycheck, trying to pay their bills, trying to pay their cost of living, and trying to pay their mortgage, this definitely would be putting strain on their lives. Factor into that cost of living expense. For people living paycheck to paycheck, their priorities are going to be with the things that allow them to continue to do their job, to continue to survive. And if they end up defaulting on their mortgage, that is going to hinder them and put them under a lot of pressure. There are a lot of people who are under mortgage pressure and have been since the beginning of the pandemic, let alone probably earlier than that as well. It is something to understand, it is something to be aware of. Make sure you are checking what your interest rate is, making sure you are doing the best you possibly can to potentially fix your interest rate, or look at locking in something if it's gonna worry you if interest rates rise too quickly. I've made videos on this topic extensively. Please feel free to use the playlists on my channel. The reason why I'm making this content is for people who need to gain an understanding of what their options are, how they can help their own situation to basically stay afloat. It's something that is a scary thought, but something that is manageable if you put the work in, understand your position, and then act on those decisions that you have to make. Which leads me into risk number 2. Let's call it a cash flow crunch. This is where you might have an investment property that is now vacant and difficult to rent out for whatever reason, meaning you're losing your source of income from that rental, which has been helping alleviate your mortgage. Let's say you lose your job, which again, you're losing a source of income that would definitely be going towards alleviating the pressure of paying down your mortgage. No one wants to default on their mortgage repayments. It is a serious concern for a lot of people, and it can put so much pressure on people. I know I'm kind of recycling what I've just mentioned about interest rates rising, but it's technically the same concept. If you lose your sources of income and don't have a plan, don't have a backup, you are going to be under a lot of pressure to continue making those repayments while you're trying to do things like look for new tenants for your investment property or look for new employment. It's not as simple as just walking into a place and being like, hey, I want a job, or putting a dollar value onto your house and saying, please come and live here and sign a 12-month contract. There's process involved and it takes time. This is just another reason why I discuss topics like building an emergency fund. Even though they are saturated on the internet, it is a really great concept as to something that people should definitely be doing. They can keep you afloat in times of hardship. They can give you that period of time you need to get your things together, collect yourself, and then move forward with a plan. Building an emergency fund is definitely a good way to mitigate risks like things like your cash flow crunch scenario, or even interest rates rising for a period of time while you figure out your next step. I just would like to sidestep real quick as well and say that I highly recommend watching the movie The Big Short. The concepts discussed within definitely bring to light a very boring topic, being the 2007-2008 GFC. They make it entertaining and explain it in a way that could really paint perspective for some people. Like, it's a great watch. Go give it a watch. It's all about the housing crisis in America during 2007-2008 crisis, and it will paint a picture for what could potentially be on our horizon here if we're not too careful within Australia. I highly recommend doing it. I'm not promoted by it whatsoever. I just really like the movie and think it's relevant to this video. Risk number 3 is property prices declining due to unforeseen events. This is definitely a tough risk to foresee. However, it is a risk nonetheless. Let's start with natural disasters. It might sound really stupid to say it out loud, but buying in locations that have warnings tagged against it based on actual factual evidence and research should definitely be something you take into consideration before throwing your hard-earned dollars towards committing to a purchase, even if it seems like a good opportunity. As we have seen in the 2022 Queensland floods here in Australia, a lot of people have lost their houses and businesses. And these people have had access to information that would tell them that they have purchased in flood zones. And these people might have been naive to think that it might not have happened to them in their lifetime. However, there has been published data for decades now explaining where these prone areas are to natural disasters such as flooding, and they still went ahead with those purchases. Now, I'm not saying they made the wrong decision. Anyone could have said, yeah, don't buy in a flood zone, but it might have been optimal for them to do that at the time. But regardless, these are people who could not get insurance to cover their loss of housing because of the area being a flood zone, and insurance companies being smart enough not to provide people with an out if the area did or does eventually flood, like it did here in 2022. This is just one very niche example, but something definitely that if you have the option to buy in a location potentially that you might be weighing up options, or you might be trying to figure out where you want to settle down. This is something that absolutely needs time and consideration to be put into it before committing to such a big purchase. And the other aspect of this risk, being risk number 3, is buying in locations that might potentially become undesirable or devalue the value of the home that you're purchasing. One very simple example is buying near main roads. Main roads is probably the best way to say it. Main roads that potentially are going to be upgraded in the future, making it louder where you live, making your property a construction zone, or even prone to damage from the construction works that take place. This is very common. Here in South Australia where I live, there is a road called South Road that has been going under work for a very long period of time, with the intention to basically build a super motorway through it, that all the houses close by to it will have declined in value because of the absolute carnage that is happening on that road at the time and the noise that is going to come from all this new additional traffic. The main concern in terms of the financial aspect of this is if you want to sell this property in the future for a profit, it might be hindered from this work or this undertaking that could potentially happen in the future, which could affect the value of your house. All right, let's move on to risk number 4, where buying a property can lock you into becoming a mortgage prisoner. What does this mean? It means that it's going to hinder you from being able to do other things throughout your life while you have this burden or commitment of paying down a loan for a long period of time. Paying interest on a loan compounds over the years. Interest is going to pile up very quickly and be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of a loan here in Australia over a 30-year period. Loans are not short these days. A general mortgage is set up in a way that would make you pay it off over the course of 30 years. And I've heard talks of them extending that to a 50-year period, which again, I've linked a video I've made talking about the topic down in the description below. I think it is an interesting watch. I guess it's worth understanding that paying off a mortgage is a relatively slow process these days. And although when my parents first originally bought their property, they would have looked at it and gone, wow, a 30-year mortgage, that's pretty frightening, where I didn't really think much of it because I'm kind of conditioned to it. That's just how it is. When I bought my property, 30-year mortgage, yeah, no problems. That's what everyone does these days. So hopefully, or potentially in the future, when I have kids who are going to potentially buy a property themselves, who knows, they might be like, yeah, the 50-year mortgage, no probs. Whereas I myself, if I saw a 50-year mortgage and had to sign my life away for that period of time, I'd be like, yeah, no, thank you. That's pretty scary. So again, it's something to definitely understand and consider. And I guess that's where the risk comes into play, that if you sign your life away, you're going to be in it for the long haul. It's not going to be a slow process. It's going to mean you're going to sacrifice other things while you're giving money to the bank to be able to have a roof over your head, such as you might have to sacrifice holidays, you might have to sacrifice nice new toys like a brand new car, or even just having nice things if you're unable to afford it for periods of time, especially in the earlier years of that mortgage before it starts getting paid down a little bit quicker. And the reason why I'm talking about it is that it's pretty difficult to take it back once you start. It's not as simple as just selling your house, even though in some circumstances it is, but depending on what's going on in the world or at the time that you're wanting to do this, such as sell the house, you're going to get caught out potentially. And if you haven't taken that into consideration before making that decision, it could be something you regret doing. And finally, risk number 5, you could potentially buy a property that is a bit of a fixer-upper, meaning you have to spend money to get it to a livable standard, or even the maintenance costs associated with that property over the time that you have it could eat into any profits that you potentially were hoping to make when you eventually go to sell it in the future. It needs to be said, it can potentially be expensive to maintain a property and even to improve a property as well. Any type of additional work or repairs could cost you in the realm of thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars per job, and depending on how much love the property needs to keep it at that standard that you'd like to keep it at, whether you're trying to rent it out or live in it yourself, these costs will add up over time. Just for perspective, me and my partner recently purchased a property that needed a lot of love. We spent about $15,000 in 1 week getting it up to scratch and ready to be rented out. And there are still ongoing costs associated with keeping that property in a safe and functioning manner. It's something that is a bit of a project for us because we want to eventually knock the house down and build a home there to live in forever. However, during this period of time, there are costs that we need to service to make sure that the house can be rented out, to make sure that we could live in the house if we decide to move into it in the near future. It's something that we had to take into consideration. And luckily, we had thought about this process before going through it all together and actually making an offer. Before we put that final number in for what we wanted to buy the house for, we worked out how much we would have left over if it was possible to be able to do it. We put the time in to understand that spending that $15,000 was being accounted for. It was something we could do without it affecting our day-to-day lives, and it's something that we were willing to do to make sure that the house, like I said, was functioning, ready to be rented out, or livable if we decided to move into it. And the reason why I'm talking about the property in particular is that I've heard horror stories of people buying absolute shitholes and being caught out, having to pay tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it to a standard that they can live in it forever, or they can rent it out even because there are major issues with it. I'm talking about the issues that I had with my house being minor, like some electrical and plumbing work, not needing to rip entire walls out, fix drywall, paint the entire house. There are things that people don't account for when buying property because they get excited in the buying process and they don't think about the things that could potentially catch them out. This definitely is one of them. And that is just about it. These are the main considerations I would be taking into account when associating buying property with the risks that come with buying property. It's something that definitely should be well thought of. You should sink time into being comfortable in this space, because when you sign your life away to buy a property, it's a really exciting process. You want to be excited about it. You don't want those other emotions to come into play, such as dread, regret, fear, stress. All of those things, you do not want them to be amplified by the risks looming over your head that I've just discussed. I hope that this discussion was helpful, and I hope that you put it into practice when you eventually, hopefully, get to go down that route of buying a property. With that being said, I'm going to leave you there. I have nothing further to sell you today other than don't forget to be subscribed to the channel. Just be subscribed by hitting that button down below. And that's pretty much it. Have a good day. Have a good week. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.